everyone, welcome back to my channel for my first in-person video in what feels like a while. My name is Heather and today I'm going to talk you through all the books that I read in December, this final month of 2020. So the first book carries over from my November wrap-up, and that is Demon Voices by Philip Pullman. I was about halfway through this when I last spoke to you, and I finished it in the first week or so of December. It was very good. For those of you who missed my November wrap-up, this is a book of essays that Philip Pullman has written and speeches that he has given on a variety of occasions, usually themed around writing and storytelling. And I enjoyed this. I think that the first couple of essays were my absolute favorites, where he talks about storytelling and the magic of storytelling and the importance of storytelling when you're young and not limiting what children are exposed to in terms of literature. I loved all of those essays. They were really, really lovely. Towards the end is where he started to include his essays and his views on religion. And I understand that he is an atheist, and that is completely fine. He is welcome to believe whatever he likes. However, he does get really condescending and patronizing about anyone who is religious, and compares belief in God to belief in fairies, and how you can't possibly argue with religious people because you just get nowhere because they're so deluded. He doesn't come out and say that, but it's implied. And I really didn't appreciate that. If I am willing to concede that you are welcome to not believe in any sort of a god, then can you also have the respect to acknowledge that I do have the right to believe in some sort of a god, and that my belief in that does not diminish my intelligence. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts. I still respect him very much as a writer, but I don't think I would have him over for dinner. The next book that I read was Mary Barton by Elizabeth Gaskell. I, up until this point, had only read 3 of Elizabeth Gaskell's novels. I loved Cranford, though I have not read Mr. Harrison's Confessions or My Lady Ludlow, and I also loved North and South. I did not enjoy Wives and Daughters as much, but I thought I would give this one a go as it sounded very similar to North and South. Mary Barton is about Mary Barton, who is a young working-class girl in Manchester, and her father is deeply committed to the unionist cause in town. And she herself is torn between the literal boy next door, who she has grown up with for ages, and the mill owner's son. And it explores poverty and the various effects that extreme and continued poverty can have on everyone, especially if it is sustained over many generations. But it is also incredibly thrilling in terms of there's a murder that happens halfway through that really galvanizes the rest of the plot. It is still so relevant in terms of certain characters' entitlement and attitudes towards women. And I also loved that though it has a deep moral center, which for Elizabeth Gaskell was a very Christian moral center, she didn't go with the traditional redemptive ending of everything is tied up neatly in a bow, everyone gets a happily ever after. There is that redemptive ending, but it's, as I put it, a darkly redemptive ending, which makes it far more real, I think. So it doesn't quite live up to North and South. I still prefer that novel, but this was still a very good one nonetheless. The next book I finished was my nonfiction book for the month, which was Tomorrow Will Be a Good Day by Captain Tom Moore, or should I say Sir Captain Tom Moore, as he has now been knighted. Captain Tom is an adorable old man who raised millions of pounds for the NHS in the UK recently during the recent pandemic in the spring. And he recently turned 100 as well and was knighted by the Queen for all of his service. So this is his autobiography about the 100 years that he has lived through, everything that he has seen, and how at the end of it all, he still believes that tomorrow will be a good day, that we will come out of this and we will go forward into joy. And I must say I was really looking forward to this because I loved that entire message. I loved him in every radio interview that I heard this spring and summer, and he did lead a very interesting life, and I was happy to read about it. I will say, however, that it wasn't as optimistic throughout all of the autobiography as I hoped he would be, because as it says on the back, he's lived through a century filled with drama and great change, war, heartache, triumph, and tragedy. So you have to get through all of those sections before you can get to his optimism at the end of it all. And he does love his cars and his motorcycles and goes into great detail about all of them. And I will say those didn't really intrigue me as much. I'm not a car or motorcycle person. So those sections just didn't really make a lot of sense to me, so I glossed over them. But I am still so glad that I read it, and I will definitely be hanging on to this copy. Then I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to read, so I picked a few small books to read over the Christmas break. The first was My Dearest Father by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, which is a collection of letters that he wrote to his father Leopold and that his father wrote back between 1777 and 1778. And I will say these letters don't even take up the full course of that year either. I think they only cover a couple of months during that period. And I enjoyed them. I feel like they painted a really great picture of who these two men were, especially his father, who you don't really hear that much about. And something happens towards the end of these letters that is just utterly heartbreaking to watch unfold, especially as letters don't quite reach the other person in time, and then you see the evolution throughout their replies as those letters start to come in. It was really wonderful, and it was a moment that could really change their relationship with each other. But then that's where this book ends. So I was left wanting to know more of, did that event change their relationship? What happened afterwards between the two of them? And I can't tell you more than that because that would spoil things, but I do hope that at some point I can borrow the larger book of Mozart's letters from my friend Lauren at some point and maybe get an answer to that question. Next, from that same collection, I read How Much Land Does a Man Need by Leo Tolstoy, which is in fact a collection of 2 short stories by Tolstoy. The first is How Much Land Does a Man Need, which is a folk tale. It's not a traditional folk tale, but he wrote it in a folk tale-like style about land consumption and greed and consumerism that is really compelling and really touching. The second I loved even more, which is called What Men Live By, which is about a poor shoemaker who has nothing to his name and is looking to have even less this year. And as he passes the churchyard, he sees a naked man abandoned in the snowy winter churchyard. And eventually he takes pity on him, he brings him home, and it's everything that happens once this man comes into his home. And it again has a deeply religious moral center, but especially reading this on Christmas morning, I found it so moving and so touching. I would highly recommend both of these stories. Next, I read Chérie by Colette, which is the story of a much older courtesan, Léa, having an affair with the much younger gigolo, Chérie, and how they both entered the relationship as well as its fallout. And I will say I enjoyed it. I always enjoy Colette's writing. She always has a very unique style, and she comes at topics from a very bold angle, especially for the late 18 and early 1900s when she was writing. But I will also say that a lot of her characters are so self-absorbed that they become really unlikable, I find, after a while. But luckily, this is a novella that is it under 100 pages? Just over 100 pages. It's 120. So by the time I reached that point with these characters, we approached the end of the novel, so I found it much more bearable than, say, some of her longer works. But I would still highly recommend looking into her work as well as watching the film Colette starring Keira Knightley, because it really makes you appreciate her work much more. Next, I picked up another relatively short book, which was Manolesco by Abbé Prévost, or Antoine Francois Prévost, and I really walked into this thinking that I knew the plot because I had seen the opera Manon by Massenet many, many times and loved and adored it. It is about the young woman Manolesco, who is on her way to a convent. Her family have sent her there because she is far too much to handle for them, and they think maybe a convent would be the best place for her. But at a coaching inn on the way, she meets the young poet Dearest, and they fall madly in love and run away together. But their relationship is constantly foiled by Manon's desire for material wealth and pleasure. And I thought I knew how this story was going to go, having seen the opera. But there was so much more to this novel than there is in the opera. And I must say, I think I prefer the operatic version. The operatic version gives Manon far more agency. It makes her far more emotionally complex. And you see things more from her perspective, where in this novel you see things purely from Dearest's perspective. And it has a far longer scope than the opera does. You could point out little moments of, oh, there's the Saint-Sulpice bit. But that happens within the first 50 pages, and the rest of the 170 contains far many more adventures than Massenet could fit into one opera. So while I did enjoy it, and I'm definitely going to hang on to it because A, it's beautiful, and B, it's great for a comparison, there may in fact be an opera recommendations video for that in the future, so stay tuned. I still do prefer the opera, but I will hang on to this nonetheless. And the book that I am currently reading, I am filming this on Wednesday, December 30th, is The Lady of the Camellias by Alexandre Dumas fils. I was recently corrected on my pronunciation, so I apologize to any French speakers who were cringing at my earlier pronunciation. And this is the story that inspired both the opera La Traviata and the film Moulin Rouge. It's another semi-autobiographical story of Dumas' own relationship with the famed Parisian courtesan Marie Duplessis. But he has given both himself and Marie fictional names. So there's Marguerite and who is he? Armand, I think. Yes, Armand Duval. But it is still their love story as she, being such a successful courtesan, is hesitant to open herself up to love. And in addition, she is slowly dying of consumption. And it is the tragic unraveling of their love. And my hope with reading this at the end of the year is, it's only 200 pages, so I'm hoping to read half of it today and half of it tomorrow on New Year's Eve. And my hope is that I will finish it before the new year, and that if I finish this story of a woman dying of a lung disease and not bringing that with me into 2021, that perhaps the pandemic, which also has a lung-related virus, will also not carry into 2021. So that's my hope. It can't hurt anyway. So I will let you know how I got on with this in my January wrap-up next month. So there you have it. Those were all of the books that I read in December. Let me know down below if you read any particularly wonderful books this time of year. If you have Christmassy recommendations for me, I always struggle with reading specifically Christmas books. I don't know why that should be. Or if you have any other recommendations for me based on my reviews. Let me know down below. Have a very happy new year, and until next time, be safe, be well, and happy reading. Bye everyone.